This is a journey into sound. A journey which along the way will bring to you new color, new dimension, new values, and a new experience.
Welcome to the Spirit Sessions podcast. I'm your guide, Katie Silcox, bringing you your weekly self-love soundbite. Join us, where I'll help you find your true spiritual home, where every single aspect of you is holy ground. Holy ground.
This is a journey into sound.
This is a Spirit Session podcast with Katie Silcox. Venga chicos, empezamos.
Hey everybody, just a super quick note as we dive into this really fun podcast with Kate Stillman. This podcast is for general information purposes only. It is my heart's longing to provide you with educational tools so that you can make the best decisions for your own life. Our services do not provide medical advice and are not intended to be a substitute for your professionals that you definitely, I'm sure, have in your life. So with that, please enjoy the super fun time I had with Kate. All right, everybody, it's your favorite Kates of the Ayurveda world, Katie Silcox, coming to you with the amazing, incredible Kate Stillman. I'm not going to read her bio because I know it. I mean, I don't, but she's mega. She has probably the most popular podcast on Ayurveda in the world. I'm making that up, but maybe. I feel like it is. And I feel like we sort of have tracked similar realities and yet super different humans doing good work in the world. Kate Stillman, founder of Yogahealer, authoress of several books, one that we're going to talk about today. Welcome to Spirit Sessions.
Woo woo.
Yay. So you and I have been having some backdoor conversations. Some over text and some when I was on your podcast. And so before I ask you about this, I just want to say to our listeners, I really believe that there are certain people in the world that are meant to do what I see Kate doing, which is to dive into the places that other people haven't gone or haven't gone broadly, and to be a translator and bring these things back and modernize them, which is what the ancient texts of Ayurveda actually tell us to do, and to kind of be like a renegade in a way. And I admire your fearlessness, or what I perceive to be your fearlessness. And so I essentially have two questions for you. Mm-hmm. And the first, maybe we'll start with this one and then we'll get into the practicalities around the second one. The first question is, how do you personally navigate your dharma in the world, that in a way that it seems that you so effortlessly express whatever you want to express in a fearless way? How do you approach the world in that fearless way? Like, what have you had to do to get there, and have you had any obstacles along the way, and how did you overcome them?
No, I was just born like totally being able to do this shit. No, not at all, really. When I look back, I was a good student and I was pretty conventional. So I was good at teaching the teaching to my teachers. And that's good. Like, that's a good skill. I'm also more of a futurist innovator type, just by personality trait. And so I found that they're just faster, easier, better, more fun ways to learn. So I started teaching those, and then I started getting flack, right? Because that's what happens when you start to go a path that's not just based on, I'd say, like codification and acculturation. So when you challenge a tradition, if people understand the rules, but they don't understand the principles behind the rules, then that's where there's friction. People that understand the principles, there's no friction, because they're just like, oh yeah, that's smarter, better, faster, more fun. Good. Yeah, good. That's what we meant. And usually there's layers and reasons for the rules that are layered on to the core principles. Right. And so people who haven't hit a level of inner knowing around core principle, understanding why there's rules, like maybe the rule in our Ayurveda is around food combining, or maybe it's around when to eat, or maybe it's around what to do when throughout the day. in terms of self-care practices. There's a lot of rules there, but it's like, if you understand the principles, then the rules go out the door.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because you're in a higher level of automation and right relationship with rhythm. And so that's where the journey of Ayurveda, I think it's led many of us, myself included. And I would keep coming back to I was a pretty hardcore yoga philosophy junkie back in the day, like, starting maybe 20 years ago until about 10 years ago. And then my path has led in different directions. But part of that education helped me understand the essence of the language around enlightenment and the concepts around it, like what it's pointing to. And then I went into enlightenment studies in a non-Vedic system. And that helped understand the translation of culture and, versus principle there. And I keep finding that the habits, the circadian rhythm habits that I wrote about in Body Thrive, the wild habits I wrote about in Wild Habits are pointing to this, the principles that are surrounding enlightenment, and like those concepts that, like, you're self-support, you have a self-supportive system, right? So it's like, that's one of the core principles, I would say, of words like Niralambaya and Nish Prapanchaya, like where you're actually beyond needing these supports. And that's kind of wild. Not like, I mean, it took a lot of different weird shit for me to get to that level of understanding, including urine therapy. And it's urine therapy that's such a graphic example of the self-sustaining system, because it's hydration, it's medicine, and it's food. And so when you are getting those three things in an upcycle experience, it's like, well, just think of like when you need your water bottle.
Well, can I pause you, because I'm afraid that there are some listeners out there that are like, what did she just say?
Yeah,
and
totally.
So,
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I want to pause the brilliance train of you and let our students that are listening, or our listeners, know, okay, Shivambu, this is the ancient practice, tantric, very tantric, infinitely tantric practice of drinking and utilizing topically in a myriad of ways your own urine. And now, did I do an okay job defining it?
Yeah, and that it's cross-cultural, I think is really important, that it's something that mammals do. It's something that is found in indigenous cultures historically. So it's not just the Vedas. Whereas there are teachings that, like, really you can find, like, the Veda lineage has done a phenomenal job with. And I'd say, like, urine therapy is a human universal truth. It just, no one can make money on it. So let's be real. Although the Indians are do you know about this? You're going to crack up if you don't already know this. Okay. Cow urine supplements.
Of course they're making this.
So because at some point it became taboo. So again, like, you have principles, and then you have rules, and then you have taboos, which is when you break the rule hardcore. But you create culture by changing the rules. So you're like, if you want to create a new culture, you change the rules, and then you change what's disgusting. So somewhere in the Vedic culture,
right? That's like the piece that I think the listeners that are like, wait, what did she say? Urine. This is the first time they've ever heard it, Kate. The initial reaction in me was disgust. Yeah, and that's actually cultural.
Yeah, it is. And I've been studying disgust for a while, and I'm curious about it, because there's also disgust is triggered by, and like, if you study modern behavioral science from an allopathic training, from Western training, you're going to get that disgust can be a moral emotion. So it can be moral. So it can be used, a ruling class or a ruler can come in and say, this is now disgusting, and make it a moral issue. But there's also a biological level that's kind of cool, like how we protected ourselves from viruses and bacteria from tribes that were not our tribe, because we knew that inherently there's more danger. And you can see this, like the Native Americans, different populations getting wiped out by different diseases that they hadn't been exposed to. So then the question for a lot of people, because a lot of people will say, well, urine's disgusting because of that, because it's, but then, this thing goes on in the back of people's mind, like, but wait, isn't it sterile? Like, what is it? Is it sterile? Or is it full of viruses and bacteria, and is it a waste product that's absolutely pathological for my
Which I think is what most of us were taught, that it's a waste product that's full of viruses and bacteria and excrement that you want to get out of your body. That's why it's leaving your body. But then what you've taught me is that actually it is not a waste product, and that the disgust is a cultural overlay, and that animals and babies, human babies, will interface with their urine with absolutely no fear and do it medicinally, almost intuitively.
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
So
It's kind of, yeah, it's all that. It's very confusing. And what I've come to, Katie, and I know you'll super appreciate this, is like we are in a consumer culture. Like we are consumers.
yeah.
And there's the enlightenment breakthrough of yogis is like there's post-consumerism, and it's really freaking cool. Like now a lot of I find like the sort of the hip, more techie, crypto type, peak performance type people who like those keywords, they are really going in towards like post-materialism. They haven't yet cracked the code on urine therapy, but like they're getting pretty close, because they've discovered fasting. So they've discovered these habits of yoga, of yogis. They've discovered circadian rhythm. They've discovered fasting. So there's this sense of post-materialism happening, but the yoga culture is actually pretty heavily locked in materialism. So we need our special supplements and our special drinks and our special jewelry and our special yoga mat and our special clothing.
Yeah, but I kind of love my special yoga mat. And yeah, I think I agree. And I always say to my biohacky friends, I'm like, Ayurveda is the original biohack movement. Like, and they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah. Like fasting, ice baths, hot sauna. I'm like, changing your state is what these ancients have been doing since the day dot, as we say in Australia.
Well, and that's why the language in yoga is so phenomenal. It's so phenomenally developed around enlightenment, around subtle body, around physical body, and around the interconnected bodies.
All this stuff about the nervous system and the trauma body and how the somatic being releases trauma. I'm like, this literally is yoga psychology, tantric psychology, and physiology 101. Like we are essentially relearning in modern terminology and even better scientific terminology and I think re-upping it, which is what I love about you. And I feel like I'm a part of that too. So getting back to the urine therapy, okay, so disgust, like we can, with this, when did the moment come when I don't remember my mom being like, don't drink your pee or pee on yourself in the bathtub. And I remember dating someone actually that was peeing in the bathtub. And I was like, wait, what are you doing? I was so disgusted. If he ever listens to this, I'm so sorry, because I, shamed him. And now I'm like totally fine with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's how it is when a habit is enculturated.
Yeah.
So enculturated habits that are disgust triggers were punished by exile. And you still see this in like strong culture. Like my husband grew up in a Mormon family, and it was like, if you didn't do this, that, and the other, like it was basically this or exile. And it does make sense, because we did, have a evolutionary, inbuilt mechanism that made us resist other tribes because of bacteria and viruses.
Yeah.
So there's an inherent intelligence around that. It's interesting, like some of the crazy freaking practices in India where you rub like cow poop on your body, like stuff like that. Like there's all these things.
Dead people's ashes.
Like imagine what that does for your microbiome. Like I'm super curious on those studies.
Oh, you'll go there next.
Like, what did they know? What did they know that we are just so clueless on? Because maybe that's why the yogis weren't maybe they were less afraid. So it's like,
and the hubris of our modern, this is my thing. The more I think I'm becoming wise, the more humble. It's like the hubris of our modern age. And it makes sense to me. It's kind of a beautiful thing with COVID. We are now one global tribe. We have all been exposed to this one virus. And so that it's interesting the way that annihilates this whole idea of differentiation between tribes.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Yeah.
There's got to be a golden thread. Okay, so before we we need to talk as long as we want, Kate. Like before we dive into the more into like the eagle eye philosophical, when you say urine therapy, does this mean people, because I'm sure they're out there, and I was too, wondering and asking, does this mean I take a cup, I pee into it, and then I drink it? Because then what I've read is that you might want to fast before you do it. I've also read that you might want to ferment it like you would a kombucha. So I want to make sure this information is in the podcast, because I did urine therapy for like 5 days, and then I wrote you and I was like, SOS, my boobs have grown in size. I'm not kidding you guys. My boobs got huge. I mean, they're already massive, but they got even bigger. I'm teasing. But like, and my belly swelled, and you were like, you just wrote back, too much salty. I was like, oh shit, I love salty taste. That's my downfall. You nailed it. So what do I need to do, Katie Silcox personally, because then everyone else can use this, to prepare myself to do urine therapy? And by the way, I was drinking like a massive cup or two of it a day. Maybe we start with a little bit. So can you just dive into the boring practical aspect of it?
Yeah, sure. So urine is an intuitive medicine. And that's a lot for people to hear. Like, so what does that mean? Well, in like Vedic terminology, we have these 5 bodies. So it's saying that this medicine is really lodged in the Vijnana Maya kosha, right? Like that's this intuitive
body,
self-reflective. So if you think of even the word Vijnana, right? You have reflective wisdom. So jna is to know, the wisdom of knowing. And then the VI part, like that's the reflection. It's the reflection on what you know. So that's essentially what urine's doing, is it's upcycling what, so let's just back up half a step. What is urine? So urine is ultraplasma filtrate. So the word in there, we know ultra is like, well, it's ultra, it's so fucking cool. But it's also like teeny tiny. So plasma is the part of your blood. It's like the, it's the non-red blood cell, non-platelet part of the blood. It's that more of that sort of yellowy serum. If you spin the blood through a centrifuge, it separates out, and you've got the red part that's heavy. You got the tiny little platelets in the middle, and then you got the yellowy stuff on top. That serum looks a heck of a lot like urine. It looks like really thick urine. And then you have the word filtrate, and filtrate is a filter. So you have like a filter for your blood plasma, and it's ultra fine. Okay, so that's what urine is it's that which is filtered out of the blood. So it's a snapshot of a moment in time of what's in your blood. Right? And it's changing all the time, because how many times do you pee a day? Some of you ladies pee 25 times a day. Some of you pee 10 times a day. Some of you pee like 6 times a day, right? So it's giving you that moment by moment. It's really fast. It's actually like, it's like taking the Kodak photograph, where it's like you take the picture and the camera spits out a physical real thing, not a thing on a phone, but like a real physical thing. It's like that's what that ultraplasma filtrate is. So a lot of people are confused in that. I mean, in the way that we're taught about it, we are taught that in biology class, but we're also taught that urine is a waste product. So if you Google urine, the first thing that's going to come up is urine is a waste product, and you'll be taught to fear waste products. Just like, I know your community doesn't fear menstrual blood, but like the rest of the world does.
Yeah, no, I was saying this is so analogous to menstrual taboo and menstrual fear, and how culture built itself initially around the beauty of it. And, women were making menstrual cakes for their warrior men, and now it's like the most disgusting thing on the planet to some. Yeah.
Yeah. So because it's an intuitive medicine where your body's upcycling your blood plasma.
Yeah.
It's got building blocks. So it's packed with amino acids, it's packed with hormones. It's expensive for the body to manufacture all the things that it needs. So when you upcycle, you enter a higher level of efficiency or higher order. The yogis were all about higher order, because it's like what happens in the Vijnana Maya kosha and the Ananda Maya kosha. So the bliss body and the intuitive body, which are 2 bodies more subtle than the mind. And the mind's not that subtle, really. Like the mind, I mean, we all know we can slow down and see what our mind is doing and write down what it's thinking. Like
the thinking mind is not that subtle.
The thinking mind's not that subtle, and it's so close to the emotions, and it's like, oh, I feel this, I think that, my mind puts these words into this order. But then you've got these subtler bodies, the intuitive body and the bliss body. And when you enter higher order of efficiency, that's where the physiology integrates. So then the food body, the Annamaya kosha, is getting deeper nourishment because it already has the amino acids, right? Protein building blocks, right? It's already got all the stuff that's in there. And now it's just getting more of that. So a lot of people find that go
So
deeper into
it's more than just a homeopathic snapshot. It's an actual contributor on a higher level to the building blocks. Because before I was kind of thinking, oh, it's a homeopathic snapshot of what's both working and not working.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not too. So I say it's got three functions. It's hydration, it's food, and it's personalized medicine. And so you can use it better than most things for those three functions.
So if you have an imbalance, a doshic, like let's say you have a serious chronic issue that you're dealing with, can you still, so it's funny, as you were saying, Katie, I'm not going to tell you exactly what to do and how to do it. It's intuitive medicine. Immediately, my Vijnana Maya Kosha dropped an image to me of a small dropper bottle. I instantly got an image when you said that. And I'm like, oh, okay, I want to do some 3 drops or so under the tongue. Like, let's get it going. And if you would have just told me to do that, it's the same, I'm really doing this in my spiritual practice, having come from a quote lineage-based tradition where everyone told me what to visualize and what sound to feel in all of my chakras. Now that I've gotten rid of that overlay, the chakras themselves are revealing to me their images and sounds. And when you get it from your body, girl, you don't doubt it. Whereas if someone else tells you, there's always going to be this little pecking bird of doubt.
Well, and it's like second principles rather than first, right? It's like, it's at a level of, there's already been a filter.
Yeah.
But in order, it's like, in order to get it, it's like, you kind of got to hear about it. You got to know people doing it. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, now I can hear my intuition. I mean, the same thing happened to me with body work. So knowing what other people are doing is super helpful. And then finding the easiest place to start for those who are curious. It's just like, if you don't know what other people are doing, it's like, So it can go anywhere. It can go in the eyes, up the nose, swish it in the mouth, snort it up the sinuses, douche with it, enema with it, rub it into your skin, drink it, fast with it. So like, those are all the things people are doing. Wash your hair with it.
We have this disgust thing, but when I told my mom about it, she was like, I'm not going to drink it, but let me tell you, I will put it on my face because it is an aspect of modern skincare. Like most people don't know that. I think it's horse urine that they use in these like really expensive face creams.
Yeah, urea. Yeah, so urea is the main skin softener. So it's also why babies come out so soft, is because in utero they're in 95% urine. Right? So they're in a urine bath for months and months and months and months, and they come out and they're like, they're perfect. Like their skin it's amazing, So if there's an old Irish, well, and this, also goes back to why it's interesting to find it in all these different cultures. So there's like this Irish grandmother's wisdom about massaging infants with pee.
Wow.
Yeah. Right. So it's like, you can find it everywhere. When they some of the explorers first found Native Americans bathing in their pee in the morning. I just saw a video from this guy in Africa. It was like some intact tribe in Africa. And the guy is standing behind an oxen taking a leak. And you know how oxen, they pee like 2 gallons when they pee, and he's taking a bath under the stream of the oxen. So like, everyone has, like, when I first ask people, especially right now I'm in Mexico, but when I'm talking to anyone, I find that people are different. They're avatars, they're snapshots of belief systems and culture in real time. And I try to find the working memory of it, because there's usually some. So in Mexico, it's like, oh yeah, jellyfish stings.
Pee on it.
Yeah, stingrays. Oh yeah, staph infections. In Hawaii, it's big with surfers on the reef breaks. They get staph infections if it breaks their skin, because there's tons of bacteria in the coral. And so everyone knows, like, just, pee on a rag and tie it to your leg overnight where you scraped your leg.
So it helps in wound healing as well. Makes
I mean,
sense.
what's absolutely nuts, Katie, is it does everything. It does everything. And that's what I think makes people really uncomfortable,
Yeah.
is that it's like too good to be true. It's the whole golden fountain of youth. It's like so right there. And of course, then there's this overlays and overlays and overlays of generational disgust. Like me describing that guy in the head under the oxen, like just totally, we just lost a ton of listeners on that. So gross. I go no further. These chicks are
No, I
cray-cray.
felt the disgust too, but you know what? Here's the thing, guys. Kate and I are both long lost tantric sisters. Like in the loosest version of that word, what it means is 360 degrees of willingness to be with reality, all of your light and all of your dark. And to play with that energy so that we can meditate on a corpse or watch a guy getting a urine bath, and that there isn't that reactivity. And that reactivity is actually a power loss.
Yeah, I mean, he's stoked, that video. I'll send you, I'll try to find the image and so you can put it in the show notes. But like he has, you can see he has no disgust, he has no filters, he has no barrier. He has
it's oneness.
Oneness. Right.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, like the oxen's like, get out of here, you know, and he's like, oh yeah, okay, I'm out of here, you know, kind of thing.
I think it brings us to what Ayurveda really is about, which is I love this idea of like, I don't remember how you described it, like this first level understanding, getting the overlay of the rules. And, you know, we have 15 different teachers in Shakti school and they all teach in different ways. And I always tell students, look, we want it that way. We actually do value diversity, not just of our students' backgrounds, but of our students' minds and our teachers' minds. And some of our teachers are like, here are all the rules. And then you got the Taoist tantrika me being like, but I'm going to burn down all of these rules, and you get to make your own rules when you understand being connected to the truth of who you really are. And what Ayurveda is all about is not that we just go out and start, you know, bathing in urine and poo. It's about understanding the intrinsic law behind how you do it in such a way so that poison becomes medicine and medicine can be poison, right? And that to me is where the intelligence lies. Not just that we do anything and sleep with everybody and, you know, bathe and everything. Do you see where I'm going with that?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. It's
how, when, why, in the right amounts for the right people at the right time. And it seems like urine though is always great.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting. Even I was just thinking about when you're talking about like fecal implants.
Yeah.
They saved one of my like dear friends from childhood. Like they saved her life, literally. She was like basically dying of SIBO. I mean, just like she could not digest, absorb, eliminate. She had been on antibiotics a bunch. Just had so much stress for so long. And like one fecal injection into her asshole totally reversed the condition. It was really interesting how like that's now like people are like, oh yeah, I know fecal implants. Like, yeah, it's no big deal now. Well, it was a big deal 5 years ago. It was unheard of 10 years ago. 20 years ago, it would have been thought of in Western culture. They've been doing it in India for 2,000 years. So
well,
like,
it would have gotten your medical license removed.
Yeah, and you would have considered someone who didn't understand bacteria. And now what we're saying is like, wait, the whole physiology is made of different microbiomes. So the number one place I would have most people who are serious about like, I want to see what this does. And I'm into Ayurveda and I'm not new. I have practices.
Yeah.
I hit the mat. I sit on the cushion, right? Maybe sporadically, but regularly, right? Like I get it. I have practices. Start to swish.
Yeah.
Just start to swish with your pee. Because what you're going to find is that the mouth has an oralome. It's the microbiome of the mouth. So oral plus ohm, right? And an ohm is a whole system. So the mouth bacteria has a whole system and it has an insanely important job, and that's to generate nitric oxide. And nitric oxide it's a quantum anti-inflammatory for the physiology. Now, when you swish, it also starts to open up the ostia into the nostrils, especially those of you who don't have ama, you'll feel it right away. You'll feel it start to circulate in your sinus microbiome. So just through swishing, you're going to get more interested in your sinus microbiome because you're going to notice like, this is clearing my head in interesting and new ways. Those of you who are really awake will feel it to your pineal gland. They'll be like, oh, swishing does this thing where the off-gassing, and that you asked about age before, this is advanced now, but like people will do that more aged because you're going to get a lot more off-gassing or opening of nitric oxide in through the sinuses into third eye.
Aged urine.
Aged urine. Because it just ferments. They basically pee in a jar and it ferments. So you don't have to do anything to it. It just ferments and it becomes a stronger and stronger medicine. Starting with like just drinking some coconut water so you pee and your pee tastes more like coconut water, and starting to swish that will recover your oral microbiome. And if you are already scraping your tongue or looking at your tongue because you're into Ayurveda enough to know that tongue health is telling you everything that's going on in the body, including the digestive tract, and it's a really easy thing to see. Instead of just scraping your tongue, what you're going to see is your tongue recovering.
Just with
see it getting
oral,
younger. Just swishing, and you don't even have to swallow. Just swish and spit it out. And make your pee taste good with coconut water before, if you know your pee's gross.
Hey, does that mean for salty Katie that I need to drink coconut water like a whole day without eating anything, or is it more light than that?
You could, and then you'd be like, oh, I can really control the taste of my pee. Oh, I can really control the medicine I make.
Or I could just do it one morning.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I feel an intuitive coconut water hit coming on, yeah. So,
and fresh fruits, you guys do the same thing. So it's like a lot of people who are really deep into urine therapy, they are not the keto anti-fruit people, because what they notice is that their fruit makes amazing pee.
So do people need to worry? So as I'm hearing that, I'm like, if I'm detoxing every night as a natural process, I'm just thinking, when we live less than perfect lives, it still doesn't matter. You could still do urine therapy swishing, right? It's like if you ate
if I drink alcohol, I'll do more of it because it's more hydrating. So 3 effects, right? Hydration, food, medicine. So it's like, when do you need hydration? Often when you're dehydrated, because you haven't been living perfect. Because like, what dehydrates us? Like caffeine, alcohol, not drinking enough water,
and fear.
Yeah. Sterile, like bad indoor environments that suck energy out of your skin, like all that stuff. So you're now taking all, like, your body already made blood plasma. That was work.
Yeah. I'm so excited about this. I'm so excited to get back into it.
Yeah. And I think that's really, to me, it's like, if anyone here listening, it's like, look back at your own yoga practice or your own meditation practice. It's like, you danced, you got excited, you backed away, you totally forgot about it. You realized that was dumb. You came back to it, you got the next thing from it. You danced with it, and it's like,
it's a spiral. It's a spanda, always 2 steps forward, 1 step back in all these things.
Yeah. And what differentiates urine therapy. So the thing with the books is funny. So after, when I was writing the Upcycle Your Pee book, I realized I needed to release Wild Habits to explain why, and the other habits that are also, to me, the free, simplest, like, break through the conventional malaise into your wild self. Like, what are these habits? And then urine's in that, squarely in that category. And it's the most wild of the habits, but it's also always with you all the time. And you're like 10 times a day producing a material. So it's like, we talked about post-materialism. It's material. It's an energetic material.
Yeah.
So it's always with you. So you stop needing to travel with toothpaste, with body oil, you name it. Like, those of you who do enemas and stuff like that, it's like such an easy enema. You'll never be constipated again. Like, you'll never. And those of you who fear the diseases of poor colon microbiome, you're re-injecting the food to the microbiome. And if, over half of your physiology is essentially microbiome, right? So it's like half, you've got like whatever, half your cells are DNA driven, the other half are microbiome DNA driven, or virome DNA driven. You're nourishing both, but primarily nourishing microbiome, and microbiome is primarily nourishing human DNA cells.
Wow.
So it's like, if the microbiome's sick, our cells, our human DNA cells are toast. Game over.
This is really interesting. It's reminding me of like my friend Dr. Harry is kind of one of the foremost experts in the country on injecting people with their own cerebrospinal fluids, this
Oh,
like
cool. Yeah.
stem cell injections.
Yeah.
This is
I've done
like
tons of stem cell stuff. So I hear regenerative medicine. Yeah. This is like,
your
in
own.
Europe, they inject urine into muscles for the neuromuscular particular issues,
Wow.
including like autoimmune diseases that are more neuromuscular, like fibromyalgia, et cetera.
Wow. It also reminds me of one of my favorite definitions of the word yogini, which is she who becomes a refuge to everyone because she has made her own body the only refuge for herself.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
You know, not that we don't need each other, but like you said, like I'm super grateful for you, for other people who I'm learning from, for my teachers, for, you know, the deep therapists that have held me and my family. I mean, we need books, we need podcasts, you
Yeah.
know, like
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it really is an inside job. And this is just seeming like such a beautiful physical manifestation of how loved we are by
Yeah.
nature.
That's right. That's right. Like it's so bizarre, you know, and I'm pretty quick to identify that with people. It's like, it's disgusting and it's really fucking weird. It really is weird until it's so it will absolutely shift your consciousness. And this is what's in that Dhamma Tantra, which is it's a 500-year-old, maybe I can't seem to find a date. If anyone's good at dating this stuff, help me. Somewhere around 500 years ago is when it was codified into this text, which a lot of the Vedic scholars and the Ayurvedic scholars will absolutely not entertain a conversation around because they're still in disgust. And that makes sense because the Vedic system is a caste system, and the priestly castes and the Vaidyas, or the Ayurvedic doctors, were of the highest class, or the highest wisdom class, advising the king. So, you know, you're creating culture at that point. So there's reason there's taboos, and those taboos change, just like every culture developed taboos around urine. They all did. It's not.
We're taking something from 500 years ago and now superimposing upon this culture that has
way longer than, no, this is mammalian. This is hundreds of hundreds of thousands of years.
Tantra specifically.
Oh yeah. The
Like
culture.
at that point, you know, if your Ayurvedic royal physician told the queen, look, rub your skin in this stuff and you're going to look young and beautiful, she would have done it, and it would have been seen as a boon. Whereas, well, on that note,
they were doing it. Everyone, that's my sense, is everyone knew. It's like to me, this is an everyone knew and we forgot, because we watched mammals do it. So this one guy I interviewed, Dr. Emmerin Mayer, he's one of the leading scientists on microbiome, of all the physiological microbiomes. He's the head of medicine at UCLA. And I was like, what do you know about urine therapy? You know, he's like, and he's German. So I find, you know, it's like you have people that are like, oh, we can talk. You know, they're way more open-minded in Europe. Doctors in Europe, scientists in Europe, way more open-minded in Mexico, other countries. The US is absolute. It's so horribly closed-minded and self-dictating. It's a real disservice to medicine. Yeah. So he was like, oh yeah, there was this study. We couldn't figure out why the mama rats were licking up the baby rat's pee. But what we did notice was that it must have been full of electrolytes, because their electrolytes shot up and they were way more deeply hydrated.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Kate, maybe a good place to end. What have you seen in you beyond your imminent full-blown samadhi? What have you seen health-wise benefit? Because you're already, I mean, sort of a bastion of health in at least many people's eyes. What have you seen as health benefits, differences?
It's replaced product. I'm noticing I consume less of, I just have less desire, like less stuff, less materialism, very more specific about architecting physiology, architecting environment. And I was already doing that, but it's like, oh, higher order, here we go again. And the idea of self, like that svadhyaya and the self-reliance, There's no way to get to, I don't think, this level without that practice, because it's so happening on all 5 bodies simultaneously.
But you mentioned to me that your hair color changed.
Oh, my hair color changed. My eye stays changed. My tongue has less cracks. My ostia really opened. I detoxed my sinus passages like Amma on a very deep level. My physiology was way more bilaterally symmetrically designed. I'm very clear on, just like I'm breaking up all this fascia as a result. I'm no longer afraid. I have Lynch syndrome. I'm no longer afraid at all of cancer. And I do enemas all the time. I no longer have, it just goes on and on. My skin, I don't use anything on my skin except for urine. I don't really use anything on my body except for urine. And I wasn't looking for a new cool way to be hip, you guys. Like, it wasn't like that at all.
This is definitely not the way. If she were trying.
If I were trying. Yeah. And then the fear that you started the podcast with, because I am naturally rebellious, but I've also built a brand over 20 years. And what I found right away is certain people, we repelled certain people from our courses. We repelled certain thought leaders that are Ayurvedic, right? That are really tied to what they think Ayurveda is and have absolutely no idea what urine is. They think they do though, and so that's been fast. And it's just opened the doors to the coolest people and coolest communities that it's like, who's really evolving? This is just one of those dikshas, right? It's an initiation that either you're hanging out on one side of the gate or the other, and if you're on the other, it's people are at a different level. The heavy urine users, and I have interviewed many of them, they're on the Yogahealer podcast. We have at least 10 to 15 shows on urine therapy or Shivambu under those 2 keywords. Is people, it's like such a fast path to awakeness for people who don't have practices. That's been wild to see that. And then to kind of experience that, the effortlessness of it as a practice.
If people want your book on this, is it available?
No, Wild Habits will be out April 1st. And that has a lot in a much deeper scientific understanding of all the wild habits, but not shying away at all from urine and the nitric oxide conversation and the microbiome conversation and the genetics and epigenetics and positive, negative stressors and inflammation. So that's April 1st. And I needed to release that before Upcycle Your Pee, because I needed context to refer back to, because the number one questions people have are the ones you asked, right? Which is, what the hell?
Yeah. Yeah. And we have to cover what the hell. And you and I are so similar in that I don't want to talk about what the hell anymore. I want to talk about your soul and I want to talk about your evolution. And I find, I'm working with some amazing people and they're like, Katie, like you have to start at base 1 to, and I get that, but I love like extrapolation process that when you dive in, it's really there. So
we have a free workshop on yogahealer.com. I think it's yogahealer.com/PEE. And there's a workshop in there and then a way to get the advanced readers of the Upcycle Your Pee book. So that's probably the best way. We're tracking the people that have it so that we can, get feedback before we launch it. My guess is that launch date will be sometime, in the second half of the year, the early part of the second half of the year.
Anything else you want to let people know about? This was absolutely fascinating and such a joy as always to talk to you.
Amen, sister. Yeah. Just that
physical form together at some point, Kate.
Yes, we will get the people together. We will get together and get the people together. We share habits, right? So the habits we have are collective. They're not individual. And so if we're trying to adopt a new habit, we need to find that collective. And then it's very, very fast. It's very assimilated. So in our Wild Habits Challenge, there's a bunch of people who mess around with this stuff. You guys can, if you go to the P workshop, you'll get an email about with how to get into the challenge. It's so important to realize that, right? That like
share habits. That's so massive.
We share habits. So if we want other habits, like if we want to check out something like urine therapy, we really need to know people doing it, or we can't actually stick with it long enough to understand what it is and how it works. It's just, It's so unusual for someone. It's like 1 in 1,000 people can do that, but everyone else, it's like, and that's what happened for me. One of my course members showed up and she's like, what do you know about Shivambu? I was like, what do you know about urine therapy? Oh, and I was like, I read this book 20 years ago, blah, 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 blah. I never met someone practicing it. She's like, I've been practicing it for 7 years. Instantly, our community turned like a barge to like doing it. And now it's normal in the yoga healer community.
I remember listening to you talk to her on a podcast, and she healed some pretty serious conditions with it. I think I remember.
People kill. I mean, and the books on it, I mean, the history of it is just absolutely fascinating, starting with John Armstrong. He was one of the first Western urine therapists. He was curing, and people were sending, doctors and hospitals were sending people home to die. He practiced from like through mid-World War I through World War II. And he would just have them 100%, like these are deathbed, stage 4 cancer, that type of stuff. 100% upcycle all urine and massage all the rest into skin and get healthy people's urine and supplement with that. And I mean, it's just, it's so bizarre and so wild. And it's so easy to be like, that's so gross. It's disgusting. There's nothing, like, no, before even knowing what it is.
Now I'm like, should I go ask some super extremely enlightened, healthy people for their urine?
Well, the Chinese men would get 10-year-old boy urine. They want the hormones and the growth. They want the growth hormone. That's what you see with that. I was thinking, it occurred to me this morning because Indy, she's going to kill me. This is
get your daughter.
She's starting to save her because she's a teenager. So skin.
Wow.
Right. That's her motivation. So she's just topical with it. But all of a sudden I was looking at her pee and I'm like, I have access to some like good teenage girl pee. How do I want to use that?
Oh my God. I'm actually living on my mentor's land here in Hawaii in my own little hut, like hardcore traditional style. And, she's not a yogi. It's like what she is. And I'm like, my sleep is like dramatically changed over the past 5 years to be above average, but it's always been where my imbalances show up is sleep. And I'm like, she sleeps like a rock. I'm like, I'm gonna see if she'll be like, okay, Katie, you are truly have lost the plot. But I might be like, can I have a cup of your pee?
Yeah. I mean, and that's where it gets interesting too. And you start to think of the hormones and hormone upcycling. Like some people use pregnant women pee for conception, because there's just more hormones. It's kind of wild.
So one more question on that, because I have been notoriously just, what a shock, like a very estrogenic woman. And I know we have to worry about over estrogenic life right now because of the xenoestrogens.
Yeah.
That was my concern. I was like, oh my God, am I drinking more estrogen with this pee?
I mean, that's a good question. So in the hormones, right, all your hormones are circulating in your pee. So you've got serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine, right? Melatonin. It's like, it's all in there. And so when you're upcycling, what happens is you do adjust, like your body started to give you some strong signals to change some things, right? Or to like increase salt, decrease salt, increase bitter, increase, hydration. It can be. For some people, it's like increased fasting, right? They start to notice like, oh, I want because fasting pee tastes different. It tastes way more like coconut water. So after a couple of days, like your pee ends up tasting a lot like an electrolyte probiotic drink, which it is. Okay. So it cleans it just starts to clean the physiology up. Even if there's too much cortisol in the system, right? Because a lot of people right now have adrenaline addiction. So there's too much cortisol, but it adjusts. And a lot of people notice that they sleep way better. And in general, like in the Dhamma or in the Dhamma Tantra, he's like, just drink your morning pee, like first flow, mid catch, right? And that's where a lot of people go. And then you have the extremists, just like the extreme yogis that are just like, I'm going to loop
all day, every day.
Yeah. And see where that goes. You just think of like the baby in utero, right? It comes out perfect, deeply hydrated. All microbiomes are basically ready for, they're not there when the baby comes out. They build in the first 2 years, but like everything's the stage is set for that happening. So then as a human being, when you start to do that, like you just start to notice like, oh my gosh, it's all right there around me, and it's informative. It's changing my hormones.
Mhm.
So then there's no need for HRT. Like right. It's like I was thinking about that a couple weeks ago. I was like, I'm 48 and I'm like, I could so easily have a baby. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I can just feel that, like, oh yeah, I'm so juicy and strong and vital and vibrant, and there's no irregular and blah, blah, blah. It's like, it upcycles the hormones into higher order.
So it's reminding me of, and people kind of laugh about this, but it's real. There are these pictures of these old yoginis in India that are 80 years old standing there with their young daughters.
Yeah. Wild, huh?
Yeah, that's going to be you, Kate Stillman. I mean, not that you need to have another baby, or if you want, go for it. But babe, this has been so amazing. I think you're such a gift to the planet. I'm excited to learn more about urine therapy. I'm sure everybody can check out those links. We'll put them in the show notes. And yeah, I'm gonna, to be continued. I'll update everybody on how it goes for me.
Awesome. And I just want to thank you for getting it so fast. And that to me is a real reflection of your level of embodied, of just who you are, and of embodied consciousness, and of just really being in a place of your own grounded receptivity. Because to me, it's like, who at least gets it enough to be curious, right?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I'll try everything, and I'll bow at the feet of anything, like try it on.
Our next conversation will be on holy shit. Just kidding.
Yes, you can come on the pod and talk about holy shit, and I'll come on yours and talk about this idea that's very taboo about what the ancient Japanese Taoist yoginis were doing with semen.
Oh, that sounds perfect.
Oh my God, did I just agree to that? Yes. Okay, we're going to do it. It'll be like the semen and shit episodes are going to be like both of our top listened to episodes.
Totally. These chicks are cray cray.
Okay, have a great day. Thank you so much. All right.
ফুটে ফুল